Mic is too high.
Good evening, welcome to Fitchburg Community Television, and welcome to this edition of Inside Fitchburg. My name is Bill Gates, and I will be your host for this next hour of information. And tonight, the information we're going to be spreading is the Zoning Act. And although that may sound like a little bit of a boring subject, it's actually going to be a very much of interest to the people of the city of Fitchburg, because currently Fitchburg is in the process of changing their zoning ordinance. The reason why, or what is zoning, is something that is set up by the state of Massachusetts, allowing cities and towns to, maybe you guys can give a better definition. I'm going to read a definition from the Zoning Act, which will hopefully give an outline of exactly what zoning is. And as the state of Massachusetts puts it, the Zoning Act was enacted in 1975 to facilitate, encourage, and foster the adoption and modernization of zoning ordinances. The purposes and objectives include, that are not limited to, lessen congestion in the streets, to conserve health, to secure safety from fire, flood, panic, and other dangers, to provide adequate light and air, to prevent overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration of population, to encourage housing for persons of all income levels, to facilitate the adequate provision of transportation, water supply, drainage, sewage, schools, parks, open space, and other public requirements, and to conserve the value of land and buildings, including the conservation of natural resources and the prevention of blight and pollution on the environment, to encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the city or town. How about sum it up, guys?
But now,
Okay,
what are we going to talk
next
about?
week.
You stole our thunder.
Zoning is a very important thing to the city of Fitchburg. Let's take it back a little bit before you actually decided you wanted to go over the current zoning ordinance and change it. There were a lot of things that took place before you got to that point. One of the first things is you got together a bunch of, and I know you're very proud of this, got together common citizens to...
I was going to tell him that.
You know, I'd say I've been doing this show now for how long, and they have to remind me to introduce the guests. But that, I know you guys for so long. So our guests tonight are David Streb, the planning coordinator for the city of Fitchburg, and Michael O'Hara, the principal planner for the city of Fitchburg. Gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us, Bill.
Oh, you're welcome.
So let's talk a little bit about zoning, okay? Because it is really important for the city.
Well, the way you got started with finding that you needed a zoning change within the city, within certain areas of the city, was the development of a master plan.
The master plan does lay the foundation for an effective zoning ordinance. And the city created the Vision2020 Master Plan, a copy of which I have here, and many of the viewers may recall this document. A couple years ago, it was adopted 2 years ago. It was a very long process, probably about a year and a half, and a lot of citizens were involved. It was very gratifying being part of that process because of the number of citizens who came to all the different meetings. We broke up in the seven working groups in different subject areas, and we created a document essentially that reflected to a great degree how Fitchburg wants to develop and how it wants to become. And many of the recommendations then in our proposed zoning ordinance reflects those desires, reflects the kind of changes that people want to see in Fitchburg. So it's really been the kind of the textbook way that you're supposed to amend your zoning ordinance, and so we can see ourselves getting near the end of the process, and we're really very excited about it.
Now that master plan process took some time. There were a lot of people involved.
Yes, there was. In fact, this is located on the city's webpage. In fact, the full text of the master plan, including a list of the people that were involved in that process. City councilors, of course, and planning board members, and zoning board of appeals, the mayor, but also probably 60 or so private citizens from all walks of life. We tried very hard to reflect all different people. And what we came up with is a set of recommendations in the areas of economic development, housing, I forget. I wasn't prepared to talk about this,
That's all right.
but it's all in here. And reading through it, it's striking how many of those recommendations we're working on currently. But our most recent effort, and what we're here to talk about tonight, is our zoning ordinance. And with me here tonight is Michael O'Hara, the principal planner for the city. You already introduced him, I'm sorry. But it was actually his first project when he came to work for the city. Timothy Smith left the city about a year ago now for private sector employment. And he more or less was a project manager for the master plan. And Mike O'Hara's first project upon joining the city, besides all the other stuff we have to do, you know, the planning board, the conservation commission, all the different things, is the zoning ordinance. And so this is really, he's been the project manager for this process.
I think I'd like to just give people an idea of what the planning department does. It's not simply every once in a while you take a look at the zoning and you make changes. You have to deal on a daily basis with people coming into the city of Fitchburg, with what currently goes on in the city of Fitchburg, seeing whether it meets the current zoning, whether or not new proposals coming into the city meet the current zoning, making sure that all of the new streets and utilities going into those streets are up to standard. So there's really quite a bit of work that takes place on a daily basis in order to make sure all these things take place. Mm-hmm. And that's your job.
Oh, okay. Well, a large part of what the office does is administer the community development block grant, and I'll let Dave speak to that, but it also serves as staff to the Conservation Commission and Planning Board, as David mentioned. So any development proposals that come before those boards, we review and provide recommendations to them. Any special permits, any new subdivision plans that, for example, come before the planning board, we review to make sure that it adheres to the board's subdivision regulations and the existing zoning ordinance.
Now, with all of these changes going on in the city of Fitchburg, with the master plan, Fitchburg came to a point in its growth where it had really stymied and there wasn't a lot going on. Knew that it had to make some substantial changes and create maybe some new initiatives in order to get Fitchburg off the ground. And really, we're just on the ground floor of changes going on in Fitchburg. One of those changes would be the urban renewal plan that was initiated by the planning department and Mike Leonard.
Excuse me, sorry, I apologize for coughing and the scratchy voice. But let me correct you on that point. It was really the Fitchburg Redevelopment Authority that began the process for the urban renewal plan. Certainly the Office of the Planning Coordinator has embraced it wholeheartedly. We've provided them quite a bit of support from our geographic information system. We've made maps for them. We continue to do so. We provide information for them. We did surveys for them. But really the initiative for that process and the administration of that plan rests with the Redevelopment Authority. That being said, we're very excited about the impact that plan will have on the city of Fitchburg, and I've already said before the show started that I'd love to come on a show and talk about that plan, because I think there's some very exciting parts of that plan that are going to have a dramatic effect on downtown Fitchburg and the college neighborhood area, that whole, the urban renewal area, which also can be found on the city's webpage. And I suppose at some time, maybe toward the end of the show, we'll give that URL for the city's webpage for those people that aren't aware of how to get to it. But we have a lot of information about the urban renewal plan on that as well. And a number of the proposals in the urban renewal plan stem from recommendations of the master plan and now are reflected in our proposed zoning ordinance. A couple of things that come to mind immediately are allowing by right housing on the upper floors of downtown. That was a recommendation of the economic development section of the plan, and that's a feature of the urban renewal plan. In fact, the economic development people are going to be offering a $5,000 grant for the development, for the rehabilitation or development of housing units on upper floors within, I believe, 2 blocks of Main Street in downtown. Also, they're going to be offering a grant of, I believe, $5,000 to people who want to develop single-family housing in some of the vacant lots in the urban renewal district, chiefly in the college neighborhood. That's going to be a cash grant, essentially, awarded to developers that want to build houses. And one of the things that we're going to have to do is lower the minimum lot size requirement to allow that. That was a recommendation of the master plan, and that's reflected in our, well, actually it's not reflected yet in our draft zoning ordinance, but it's certainly, it's going to be. That's something I want to make clear for people that do review the text of the zoning ordinance. We came forward with it at the public hearings and in front of City Council when it was really in draft form. There's still a lot of work to be done on this zoning ordinance. I know a lot of times things are unveiled by government when they're basically in final form and ready to stamp. That's not the case with this document. We feel we're close, but we still are aware of a lot of things that still need to go in. And in fact, we're having another meeting that next week. The zoning committee is getting together on the 19th to discuss some of those changes.
Really, all of this is a work in progress. Even with the Vision 2020, the recommendations were made. They were put into a master plan. But even that changes as things change, as the zoning changes, as different companies come into the city of Fitchburg. The nice part about all of these plans is they're left open to interpretation. And I think, having watched the city council meeting of a couple of weeks ago, that seemed to be the most exciting thing about the changes in the new zoning is a lot of areas are really left open to interpretation, to allow for different types of growth coming into the city.
The flexible development part of the zoning ordinance.
Which we'll get into talking about.
That is one of those cutting-edge ideas to which you had referred.
I think it's a great idea. It really is. But we'll get into more in depth later on in the program. We're going to take a 30-second break here for a public service announcement and allow David to cure that scratchy throat. So this is a public service announcement. We'll be right back in about 30 seconds.
Next stop, Marciano Stadium in second-ranked Brockton. The Boxers trying to give Coach Colombo another win and another step towards the record book, but Fitchburg had other ideas. Tim Keenan with the reception, and he gets dragged down finally, but Frank McDonald on the goal line will be strong like bull. Get out of my way, 7-0. Then Jason Plumley also pulls his way in. It's 14-0 Fitchburg. The Boxers, were they on the canvas? Colombo says, no way, guys. Let's get up and let's get going. So they do the reverse to Robert Whitaker, and no one's going to catch this speedster. Oh, he's like lightning. See you later. 62-yard touchdown. 14-7. Brockton back in the game. Boxers fans getting excited. Whitaker taking a drink and liking what he sees. But Fitchburg responds. They were just tough. Here is McDonald with his second touchdown of the game. It's 21-7 at the half. In the second half, the Boxers come out throwing. Michael Kershaw to Pat Emanuel, and he bursts his way into the end zone. We have a 21-14 contest. But Norman Cole plunges in here for Fitchburg, and that sends the Boxers to the canvas. A big upset as Fitchburg stays perfect and the Boxers fall 28-14. Frank McDonald leads the way with 2 TDs. Time now for our rankings, and we call it our Super 7. And number 1 is Boston College High School, followed by the Brockton Boxers and Marshfield at number 3. Peabody, number 4. North Attleboro going for their 4th straight Super Bowl is at number 5. 6 is Norwood, and rounding out our Super 7 is Chelmsford. On the scoreboard.
Quite frankly, I have to make some comment about that show on Sunday for you viewers out there that watched Gene Levanchi's Channel 7 program on high school sports. Basically, it was all about Brockton, even though Fitchburg beat Brockton 28-14. And then in the rankings following, Brockton is ranked at number 2, and Fitchburg didn't even get on the map. This Friday evening at Crocker Field, Fitchburg will be playing Zavarian, who was number 1 in the state last year, and it should be a very exciting game. We'd love to see a lot of people down there on Friday night. Also, congratulations to Coach Ray Kazenza, who this week was awarded the New England Patriots High School Coach of the Week award for that game with Brockton. And I'm sure Coach Kazenza would give all the congratulations to his staff and the players. So congratulations to Fitchburg High School football team. And back to zoning. What a segue, huh? We're talking about the zoning changes that have occurred in the city of Fitchburg, or are about to occur in the city of Fitchburg. What was it in that master plan, in the development of the master plan, that you felt the zoning changes needed to take place?
Well, I think that another way to state it would be that some of the recommendations in the master plan included some of the things we've been wanting to change in the zoning ordinance. There's been some problems with Fitchburg zoning ordinance from an administrative end and from really changes in state law for some time. So while the master plan is the underlying foundation of some of the zoning changes, I think more significant are the administrative problems with the current zoning ordinance. Some of the issues with the Zoning Board of Appeals being overwhelmed by pre-existing non-conforming uses that had to go to a meeting to put a deck on their house when the deck wasn't going to be any closer to the side yard, to the side of the property than is allowed, and yet because of the way our ordinance was written, it needed a special permit. And the poor Zoning Board of Appeals was meeting, twice a month and dealing with some of these issues.
And the other side of that, since I deal with that in my real job as a land surveyor, it's also very expensive for those people coming in.
Right.
Number one, they might just want to put up a 10 by 10 deck on the back of their house, which would probably cost them $500 or $600 to put up a deck. Having to get their land surveyed, making sure they know where the property line is, putting together a building permit plan for a deck gets very expensive. And it really, in a lot of ways, is not necessary to put up an above ground pool with a building permit, having to get your lot line surveyed. As a land surveyor, a great idea to know where your lot lines are, but to go to that expense every single time is a bit much.
And also it's $100 to apply for variance. Let's not lose sight of the fee. That's even if you do all the work yourself, you're still out $100. And I think more than that, though, is that it's just not good government. I think what we want to do is make government as painless as possible for people. We still want to protect the urban form, but we want to do it with as least an intrusion as is necessary. And I think what happened was there were let's just say that there were some problems with the existing zoning ordinance. So that's really what we've been wanting to change the ordinance for some time. We've talked about it for years. Tim Stewart, the city's planning coordinator, probably 9 years ago, last rewrote the zoning ordinance with not nearly as much public participation as we're having this time around. And that's been what the experts say is that you want to do it every 10 years or so. And so it was time to redo our zoning ordinance.
1986 was the last time?
Yeah, so it was actually more than 10 years. It was around then. And also the map. I don't think the map has been changed significantly since 1969. I believe that, because that was when the last master plan was done, and I believe that was the last significant zoning map revision. We've been picking away at it over the years. You may recall that the old former Weber Lumber was industrially zoned, and then the 99 restaurant came in there. We changed the zoning there for that. Also, we changed the zoning on Fairmont Street to allow residential in an industrial zoned area.
And there
were some other little things like that.
And those things are difficult because people refer to that as spot zoning, and why did you do for one and you can't do for another, and each circumstance has to be looked at separately. And again, we'll get back into that flexible zoning that you're talking about, which is the right thing to allow for those types of interpretations. But a lot of people watching the show tonight might not understand what zoning is or why different zoning districts are created. You have rural residents, you have residents A1, residents A2, side yard setbacks, so people don't understand what front yard setbacks are, side yard, rear yard setbacks. They own a piece of property, they have a house on it, and they feel that I should be able to do whatever I want to on my property. So what are the reasons that you set up zoning in this fashion so that some areas of town might be different from others?
Well, I guess the short answer is zoning regulates land use and regulates the placement of structures and other buildings in relation to the property lines. I think the reason for differentiating between different types of land uses and have different setbacks for different types of structures and different uses is that there could be a conflict between residential uses and commercial industrial uses. That's why The tendency in zoning is to separate those kind of uses. You don't want the backyard of a residential subdivision right up against the industrial park.
Although it does occur.
Although, and there's no way to not have those edges occur, but the idea is to lessen the impact on the abutters. That's why you allow for buffer zones, for landscape requirements in the zoning, for additional setback requirements, perhaps when you're adjacent to a use that might not be compatible with the use on the other side of the property line. So I guess that's the short answer.
Why in years ago, in the days of the paper mills, and people tended to build around the paper companies, there really wasn't any zoning in place. Three-deckers, all of these buildings were crowded together. For example, in the Claygon area, in the Water Street area, these buildings were basically on top of one another. Was this one of the reasons why the Zoning Act came into place? Because of the danger of, obviously, fire. Fire can jump very easily from one building to another. We've talked about side yard setbacks, and people wonder why they have to have these setbacks, try to separate the buildings in case of fire. But in terms of the areas now that are so congested, I know at your meeting at City Hall, you talked about the possibility of raising some of those three-deckers and allowing single-family structures to be built in those areas. Is that something that we're looking at with the new zoning change?
Well, those are some things we're looking at, but not really as part of our zoning change. That's really a kind of a separate initiative. And you mentioned the urban form back at the turn of the century, and then urban planning got to be in vogue. I think initially to provide parks for the poor immigrants to get rid of their tension, and to provide enough to lay out a urban scene with churches and other public uses. But I think what's happened is people's tastes have changed. And I think with the advent of the motor car, we've wanted to have our own patch of land and our own, people don't want to live like that anymore. It's fundamentally the problem. And I think that's one of the issues we're facing in Fitchburg's central city. We do have some of those old urban forms left, and they're not doing well. And they're very expensive to rehabilitate. I think we still need some of them, but I think we need to reduce the density of them. But they've all been non-conforming since 1940, so it's not really a zoning issue.
Right.
It's what's happened, I think, is that our tastes have changed, and that people don't want to live in those houses anymore. Now, maybe there's something we can do to bring back a vibrancy to our central city area, that people will want to live in those places again. So I don't think we can tear them all down.
And what's unusual to the city of Fitchburg over the last 10 years is, and I don't know if you saw the email on the Fitchburg homepage, a person wanting to move into the city of Fitchburg was trying to find an apartment or a house to rent, and realized that the rents have got extremely high. Certainly not as high as a Cambridge or,
we're
east
still
of 495.
We're still significantly less.
The prices are jumping significantly in this area due to the push from 128 and 495.
Right.
I was down in Hopkinton the other day, and I was amazed at how much that town of Hopkinton has high tech in that town. And it was incredible the amount of traffic that comes out of that town. But that growth is moving this way. A lot of people have earmarked Fitchburg as a good place to live. I think that's become obvious as you as planners are becoming a lot busier with people coming in looking for land and proposing new subdivisions.
But I think one of the challenges that we face is to avoid the donut theory of a declining central city and gradually expanding suburbs. I think what we need to do is bring more life back to our central city area with the kind of initiatives that you touched on earlier, developing single-family homes on some of the vacant infill, what they call infill housing in our central cities, and bringing a vibrancy back to the center city. Sure, we need to have subdivision development in some of the area remaining in Fitchburg, But I think it's really important that we also take care to preserve the beautiful parts of Fitchburg. I mean, of course, you run into it too, where people, they just didn't know how beautiful it was in certain parts of Fitchburg. It's very rural and very beautiful, and I think the challenge becomes, how can we write a zoning ordinance that's going to preserve and protect that, but still allow for reasonable housing development, and also encourage the development of some of the vacant areas that we're getting in our central city area. And I think those were recommendations in our master plan, and I think that what we've done in the zoning ordinance, in the proposed zoning ordinance, is to try to adopt policies that will encourage that sort of development.
In the second half of our show, we want to open up the phone lines to allow viewers to call in any questions with Dave and Mike about the new zoning changes or the current zoning. If you're proposing to put an addition on your house, maybe you could get a little bit of information, although that's not the job of these guys. Maybe we can give you a little bit of help in that area. But on the second half of our show, the phone lines will be open, and we're going to take another short break. We have a movie trailer that was actually done by a local student. One of our camera persons, Joanne Hughes' nephew, Matthew King, Marcus King, did a movie, and we're going to be showing that movie on Inside Fitchburg over the next couple of weeks, and we'd like to give you a little bit of a preview with this trailer. So enjoy it, and we'll be right back.
This is kind of fun, isn't it?
Small town. Two roommates.
Must be a secret of my life.
A tourist family. A ship captain. Chasing a legend and believing a historian's promise.
You must be working in quite a company. You knew that we were in the search
of buried treasure. The stakes are high, and everyone has something to gain. Yellow fruit. The Banana Man.
Miles Kane, a student at...
I hope that both Fitchburg and Leominster can come to grips with the issue of the control of curb cuts, because that's going to be a big obstacle to that project. They've got to control the unfettered access to the highway from the different parking lots in that strip. There's got to be some curb cut regulation. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. If you drive down that street and paying attention to that, you think, what the heck, look what's going on here.
To people who are watching, curb cuts are specifically designed so that you don't have traffic all entering on the street at random in any given spot. The curb cuts are given by the state, that is a state highway, Route 12, so that they allow for
you get like an 18-foot opening on or two 18-foot openings for your business.
Which allows for
but you don't have 100 feet of driveway
place.
apron, you know, right. And it controls access, it makes traffic flow better, and it's safer. And it's going to be very tough to implement in that area. So But I think, and back to your question of how it's going to impact Fitchburg, I think that Fitchburg has some delightful neighborhoods. I live in one, you live in one. I know many of the producers here live in them, right? But when people come to Fitchburg and they come in on Route 12 and they come in on Princeton Road, it doesn't look good. It looks bad. A lot of the problems we have downtown too, with people standing around and some of the, there's just things. Fitchburg doesn't present itself well in some of our public areas, and I think that's what this is going to help. It's going to put a better face on Fitchburg and try to make things look better to people coming to our community, things that we may not even notice.
What I find is very interesting is talking to people who have lived in Fitchburg all their lives or many, many years, seem to have a little bit more negative view than the people that are coming from the 495 belt. And you realize they take a look at Fitchburg in terms of the Civic Center, Cogswell Park, a brand new high school, revitalization of downtown, a college, gearing itself towards the arts, and they say, this is great. This is absolutely what you want in a community.
North Street's looking good, huh? I came down on the way here. They get not only the colleges building, but also the credit unions. I don't know if you've been by there lately, but the credit unions really improved their property a lot between the new park that we put in and the fire station. That's looking a lot better.
It was a great job on the real build in North Street. The gentleman who opened up the variety store on North Street did a very nice job. It was very clean. The municipal credit union opening up the building behind the fire station certainly is going to be an asset. The doing the gym, the college gym, and then the phase 2 is scheduled for next spring, I assume?
Oh, I hope so. Yeah. I mean, yes, it's scheduled for next spring. Of course, it was scheduled for last spring, too, and the spring before that. But I'm confident.
Has the money been appropriated?
Oh, the money's there. The money's not a problem. It's really the process. It's a laborious and very time-consuming, frustratingly so process. But I really think that we're going to be breaking ground this next spring, and we're going to have the thing essentially done by the end of next year. We've got the money. That's not an issue. Certainly the city's done everything it has to do. That's not an issue either, but yeah, next spring.
So looking at our zoning changes, we're talking about the college, we're talking about the North Street corridor. You've got some pretty interesting changes that you're proposing around the college area.
Would you like me to go over some of those, Bill?
Well, certainly I would.
I'd be more than happy to do that if my voice holds out. Otherwise, Mike's going to have to do
If it doesn't, we'll go to another commercial day.
And I will try to go rapidly through what can be a little too much detail for the average person. We are adjusting the boundaries of some of these zoning districts to follow parcel boundary lines, and in some instances to change things like if it's a commercial district, like some of our viewers may be familiar with the area near Bigelow Drive going up to Crocker School. Currently we have a neighborhood business district there where the boundary goes right through the gas station parking lot. Well, that's not right. But now we have a geographic information system where we can bring the parcel lines and the zoning lines, and we can see, and also aerial photos that really help a lot too, where we can see the parking lot and that. And so it's very easy to move the lines. There's been a lot of changes like that. Getting rid of neighborhood business districts that there's no business there anymore, or just correcting the lines, like on the way to Joanne's house, at the corner of John Fitch and Mechanic Street. There were some screwball situations there with that commercial district where it didn't really reflect the present and proposed commercialness. So those are the easy zoning changes. Those things are we now have the tools to make those changes in-house. It's very gratifying that we have the computer system to do that, and they were no-brainers.
No, not to interrupt, but because the high school has moved out on 31, does that 31 corridor now tend to lend itself more towards commercial development? Well,
that's one of the few remaining nice-looking areas on the way into town. I would hate to see your conventional strip development go on that corridor. I would rather concentrate the commercial development closer to the city, at that aforementioned intersection. Maybe get some signalization in there, and maybe a few other commercial things, but I would hate to see that develop like a strip like Route 12 has. I really don't want to see that, but that maybe a master plan update can address that issue. Another thing that we've done is change zoning district designations to implement our master planning policies. we wanted to reduce the number of outlying central business districts because we wanted the business focus to be in the downtown. And so this map reflects a number of those kind of changes. There's a small central business district along Elm Street, south of Johnson Street. Very, very small. Well, it's not here now because we got rid of it. And I don't know where Elm Street is on that map anyhow from here. So, but there were a number of those kind of changes, changing central business to neighborhood business, reducing their area slightly, not allowing all of the uses that are currently allowed in central business in some of these small outlying commercial districts. Also, some of the bigger changes, more significant, as we changed our industrial zones to more accurately reflect where industrial growth could actually take place.
And that's pretty hard to define in the city of Fitchburg. I mean,
Yeah,
there are several
it is,
big
it is.
areas, but we really need more industrial
Well,
space, which is hard to find.
Yeah, and we've gotten rid of this now. You remember this was industrial on this area near where the proposed industrial park was going to go
Along
on.
Route 2 at
ill-fated
Mount
industrial
Elam
park.
Road.
Right.
Yes.
So that we're changing that either to rural residential. There's been some talk about making that RA1, RA2. We're not sure about that yet.
Which
Like I
would
said,
allow
this is
for a
draft.
half-acre.
A little more dense development because it is close to Route 2, and if it gets sewered,
Yeah.
right now in the rural zone, you can't get a lot of density unless you have water and sewer. So in a way, either this district doesn't matter until we get sewer and water extension up to that area. Also, we made a little change here in West Fitchburg. You may recall this was the area of the proposed zoning change that failed a few years
The
ago.
industrial park.
Rather than try to make a significant expansion there, we just carried this line straight across. Currently, I believe this line goes down here. It's about 20 acres or so. I don't know if it'll have any impact at all, but that's a slight change. We changed the big limited industrial area here by the airport to all industrial. It reflects the current use. There's no reason to make it limited industrial there, so we propose that. And also, another significant change is there was an industrial zone here by the corner of Temple Street and Westminster Street, kind of up on a hill. There's no way it was ever going to be developed industrially, and yet it was an industrial
That's up
zone.
above that little pond right at the intersection.
We eliminated that. We're proposing that it be RA1, so single-family houses.
Right.
Similarly, there was an industrial zone on the way out to Ashburnham on Route 12 on the right. A lot of people didn't even know it was there. It certainly wasn't industry. We proposed changing that to rural residential and moving the line, the RA1 line, so that it goes through Ashburnham Street instead of slightly off the road. I wish we could have had both maps set up here so you could more easily see these changes. But again, if anybody has any questions about the specific proposals, the existing zoning map and the proposed zoning map, the way it is now in draft form, is on the city's webpage. It's a PDF file. So if you wait for it to download, you can really zoom in to the parcel level and see exactly where that line is proposed to go. So
We also want to remind viewers that phone lines are open. If you have questions of Dave and Mike in any particular zoning change, whether it affects your area or not, and how it might affect you, please call in. The number is up on the screen, and we wait your phone calls.
Another change that got a lot of discussion and is really may get more because it's somewhat controversial is the creation of a commercial district here along South Street, currently down to Anoosnock Road. However, from comments we got at the public hearings we had, we're considering moving it further, slightly further south to incorporate some existing commercial properties.
Because there
there.
really is commercial development beyond that
Right.
Woodstock area up to Romano Avenue with Cully's Greenhouse and Romano's Greenhouse. at
Right.
that
I don't
intersection.
think we're going to go that far, to be honest with you. I know that's been suggested, but we're very concerned about preserving the appearance of that entrance to Fitchburg and also about the traffic that is already there. But we do, right now, it's all use variances because that's all residentially zoned. So
Right.
we felt that change was important. Excuse me. Trying to think what other significant zoning changes. Oh, the new zoning districts, right? We had most recently created the medical services district zone. You know, that was a few years ago. Now we're talking about creating an institutional zone right by the college that would connect the college and Main Street. That is an offshoot, a direct offshoot of the urban renewal plan. That was proposed by that plan, and so we've incorporated into this proposal.
What benefit does that have? Calling
Well,
it
I think what it does is it...
What does it allow?
Those of us in the know that a college can go wherever the heck it wants to go, because it's essentially exempt from zoning. But it more or less reflects a tacit agreement with the college that they will expand only in the institutional zone. So it gives some measure of comfort and protection to the other people, other property owners in that area, so that they can make investments in their property and not have to worry about losing them to college expansion. And it directs and guides the college towards the Main Street area, where they've, as part of the urban renewal plan, they have agreed to locate a science and technology building at the corner of Main and North Street. So that is actually one of the proposals of the urban renewal plan, where
that was
Jerry
probably
Martell,
talking of the technology park.
Right, the talk about the technology mall. Right, that's going to be the college building. That focus has evolved into a college science building, right where the current Fitchburg Piano Exchange and the Drawbridge Puppet Theater and that stuff is.
Right.
In the coming years. I'm not saying that that's imminent, but that is one of the proposals of the urban renewal plan. I had mentioned the historic mill redevelopment overlay district. We've also had some discussion about a scenic river corridor and allowing some protection of the river and capitalizing on it as a scenic resource. That was an important element of the master plan. A lot of people have talked about that. We have a river running through our city and you can't see it.
But we're really kind of guided by state restrictions in what we can do around the river.
Well,
because you've got the Wetlands Protection Act, you have the Rivers Act,
we are
anything
protected
within 200 feet.
Well, except that we are specifically exempted in areas where a mill existed prior to 1945. We're exempt from the provisions of the Rivers Protection Act. And you're right, though. I mean, that does afford some constraints to development. But I think the purpose of this would be more to make sure that there's no unsightly land uses that kind of undercut the aspects or assets of the river.
I think one of the best examples of development around the river is mill number 3.
Oh, absolutely.
The farm stand.
Absolutely. We're very excited about that, and we want to do more of that.
They have done a fantastic job with that piece of property.
They really have.
It's definitely an asset to Fitchburg.
I try to shop there frequently. Of course, they have good stuff too. That helps.
They eat very good food.
Yeah, they do. And then new and rather controversial in its own right is our watershed protection districts. And you may have noticed in the existing zone ordinance there's a section on watershed protection, and it says something within parentheses, to be developed or something, and it never was developed. Finally, we're developing it. We've used the GIS again to determine where the watershed areas are that flow into our surface water reservoirs, and that essentially will protect roughly this area up in here, which is the area of our surface water reservoirs. And also, what we're talking about is protecting this area down in here, which is some of you may recognize as the area of Leominster's reservoirs. We feel that protecting Leominster's water is just the right thing to do from a planning perspective.
That doesn't mean that it's going to be exempt from development. It's
no,
it's going to be more restrictive.
No, it's going to be more. It's the thing. We feel that if it's something we can live with in the northern part of Fitchburg, it's certainly something that we can live with in the southern part of Fitchburg. There are regulations that are from the state DEM essentially, and it means you can't have underground tanks, and you can't have you can't exceed a certain percentage of impervious surface, and you shouldn't anyhow. So I don't think anybody's going to find them too onerous. And I like to think, now Mike tells me I'm flat wrong, and maybe I am, but I like to think that if we had something like that in place 15 years ago, that maybe we could have developed that industrial park in the southern part of Fitchburg, because we had a watershed protection that we're willing to live with in Fitchburg, and that would still allow us to put in light industrial uses in a watershed district. Mike says I'm nuts, and I probably am, but I like to. Anyhow, I think it's something that we need to do, and it's high time. So.
Certainly. Now, you've been making reference as we've gone along here to GIS. I think a lot of the viewers probably don't know what GIS is. If you're in the business of planning or land surveying, GIS is Geographical Information Systems, and basically that's information that can be obtained by satellite by using an instrument to place coordinates. You can locate telephone poles, manholes, street lines, and automatically bring them into a drawing.
Wait a minute,
and
that's
create your zone
GPS.
maps. It's part of the GIS also.
Okay. Yeah, I like to think of it as just computerized mapping. Basically, it's a map with a database behind it, and it lets you overlay different things. And I'll tell you, it's
On
been a
those
godsend
GIS
for a
maps, you
whole bunch
have
of different
zoning, you
departments.
have abutters, you have sewer lines, water lines, location of hydrants. The fire department calls up the GIS, and when there's a fire, they know where the hydrants are located, because they've had that information before, but this is certainly a lot quicker to call up a
Right,
map
and that's how
find out what
the building commissioner makes his zoning determinations with the GIS now. And the assessors do all their abutters lists now with the GIS. And the engineering department has incorporated it with their AutoCAD system to a remarkable degree. They save thousands of dollars doing our CSO study with the GIS. So it's kind of infiltrated in all different city departments. It's been very successful.
Just one last thing, David, we didn't touch on. You said there's a new area of zoning coming in called flexible zoning. What exactly does that mean?
Oh yeah, we didn't get to that, did we?
We've only got about 40 seconds left here, so we're going to have to make it a Reader's Digest version.
I'm going to let Michael talk about the flexible development zoning.
Oh, you're good.
In short, throw out the usual density requirements, lot size, setback requirements, and by special permit from whatever board still needs to be determined, whether it's a planning board, board of appeals, could even be city council, to allow development without regard to those kind of hard and fast restrictions. It would still be residential development, but it would be more flexible. You could have the house on what we call zero lot line development, right up on the property line. But show a plan, and we'll work it out at the.
All of these
planning board.
changes are coming up. They're still in the process. Dave and Mike, thank you very much for joining us tonight. People should stay tuned and watch for the next meetings for the zoning changes. And we'll see you next week on Inside Fitchburg. Good night.